Greetings to all of you and welcome to the First Unitarian Church here in Salt Lake City, Utah. I hope you are all doing well and all staying safe and enjoying the last couple of days, maybe weeks of fine weather where we can still get together with friends in a safe kind of way. Who knows what's going to happen this winter? Well, anyway. We'll work through it. I'm glad we have each other in this community. I feel really great today because I voted. It was the first time in my life that I did a mail-in ballot. And it's a funny thing about voting. I mean, everybody knows who I'm going to vote for, especially my wife knows who I'm going to vote for, and yet when I was there at the dining room table filling out my ballot and she was looking over my shoulder, I kind of just, I said, no, this is a very private matter. You know, you're not supposed to know who I'm voting for. So I guess I'm kind of protected that way. But it is strange not to actually go to the poll and vote. If for no other reason, I like the little sticker that says I voted, and they should include that on the mail-in ballots. I didn't have one. On the other hand, what's really nice about a mail-in ballot, not that I'm all that superstitious, but before dropping it in the mailbox, I kissed it. What possessed me to do that? I have no idea, as though it was going to turn Utah blue or something. I kissed it, put it in, and of course you can't kiss anything in the voting poll. So yeah, it worked out all right, and I hope that you get your votes in as soon as possible. Do want to mention that this is a great occasion in our church's history because we actually now have a history subsequent to the one that has kind of held the foundation of this church, which ended in 1991, the church's centennial, and Lorille Miller, of course, was the main editor of that history. Alan Ainsworth and his merry crew of writers have put together an online history of this church with all the bells and whistles you can imagine. It's online, so it doesn't cost anything, and you can just download videos and all sorts of extraordinary things. It's not something that you read from cover to cover because there are no covers. But the link to the First Unitarian Church of Salt Lake City's history is going to be available in the next torch that'll be going out. And sometime in midweek next week or this coming week, there'll also be a link. Be sure you connect because it is an absolutely breathtaking experience. It's going to take you a while to get through it all because the videos alone run for a great length of time. But it's beautifully done. And you're going to be proud, very proud, of this church's history from 1991 to the present. So we're going to light our chalice now, and I invite everybody at home, because so many of you do have a chalice at home, take a moment, find a match or a lighter. Take a deep breath. Understand that this is a very unifying ritual, not only amongst the families here in our own religious community, but it unites us with Unitarian Universalists throughout the country, who at some point, at this time, will be lighting a chalice.
Symbol of light.
Symbol of knowledge.
Symbol of warmth.
Symbol of freedom.
We light this chalice as a symbol of our faith.
Here we gather to celebrate hope and the infinite possibilities of love.
Today, I have a very simple question. What brings you joy? As we've spent these many months, our children and youth have continually practiced their resiliency skills and found their joy in many different ways and in many different places. This morning, I'd like you to hear from them. This morning, I have videos from several of our children in the religious education program here at First Church. They are here to tell you what brings them joy. There are a range of things that make these children happy, from their families to the community, but they speak it best. At the end, you'll also hear from one of our extraordinary high school students who took it upon himself to make his own mini video, and it's spectacular. Thank you, children and youth of the First Unitarian Church, for continually sharing your joy, your wisdom, and your resilience with us all. There is something beautiful in this. Thank you.
Mine is coloring with my sister and having fun.
Mine is probably drawing with my sister then. Probably too.
We like have the same thing.
But another thing that brings me joy would probably also like just kind of reading by myself also.
Yeah.
I like doing things by myself, and
I also like having fun with my sister. That's my most.
The thing that brings me the most joy is theater lighting. Nothing brings me more joy than lighting a stage. In fact, this afternoon, I was squealing over the new lights we got in our school space.
Playing with my puppy.
What gives me joy is making other people happy and pizza.
Joy is my family, my grandma, and my house, and having a roof over my head.
What brings me joy is my grandma's dog, my grandma, and my family and dogs.
Sometimes candy and sometimes kisses.
Joy.
Joy. Well, there's seeing wildlife, certainly. There's watching Daleks, there's that, and learning about prehistory.
What brings me joy is that I know my family is safe and we're doing the best to keep everyone else that we know and people we don't safe.
My family brings me joy in how they take care of me.
Video games, junk food / candy.
My joy is that we're doing this all together. We're working all together.
Hey everyone, I'm Dylan. I'm 16 and I'm your virtual wildflower guide today.
Actually, I'm here to talk about things that bring me joy, and this is one of them. Every year, I volunteer with the Cottonwood Canyons Foundation to lead wildflower tours for people, but this year, we had to do them virtually. I also like to volunteer with Hawkwatch International, where I monitor nesting boxes for American kestrels. I use a camera pole to observe the nest from the inside and count the number of birds, eggs, and chicks. I also get to band the kestrels so we can keep track of them in the future, and occasionally we get other birds like this western screech owl that was in one of our boxes earlier this year. One of my favorite things to do outside is explore, whether it's on the new trails in the canyons or just on canal maintenance roads near my house. There's always nature to be found somewhere, and I really love finding it. One time, my mom and I were walking on the canal maintenance road and we found these 3 baby ducklings stuck in a canal grate, so we took it upon ourselves to rescue them. It was a lot of work though. I actually had to attach a net to the other end of the kestrel camera pole, and before I could actually get a duckling up, I actually caught a crawdad with it first, but it was a really rewarding experience, and eventually, well, we got them.
Go upstream, go find your mom. Come get your baby. Pay no attention to the barking dogs. Here comes your mom. Here she comes. She hears you. Yay! 3.
We did it. Mission complete.
Awesome.
I really do love exploring nature with my family. We always see cool animals, or sometimes we even find a new fishing spot. And sure, I still play plenty of video games, but for me, there's just something special about the outdoors. Whether I'm apple picking, river rafting, gardening, stargazing, bird watching, there's just so much to do, and it really is my favorite place to be.
On a cool day in early fall, joy is close at hand. If I can find the time, I like to spread out the picnic blanket on the grass in my front yard or in the park and enjoy a good book or a magazine. I love to create the conditions for losing track of time and just sinking into happiness like a cat stretching into a sunbeam. The smell of falling leaves and the coffee roasting at the coffee shop next door, the quickening shadows of shorter days, the chilly breeze in my hair, and the feel of a warm sweater to break it. My senses are telling me that joy is right here within reach. I can find happiness in the daily grind too. Actually, I don't have to look very hard. I love my work, and I'm proud of it. I'm really happy when I'm with all of you and we do the things we do together as a church. But any work worth doing will present setbacks, failures, and heartache. No one has a great day every day. And in these times, it can be harder to find happiness. Life can seem the same every day. There's not as much variety in daily life during quarantine. Listening to the news of the nation, it's crisis after crisis, day in and day out. Good news never makes the news because it's boring, and ordinary heroes rarely make it to the silver screen. It's too easy to lose touch with the deep gladness of being under these conditions. The Buddhist teacher, Thich Nhat Hanh, says of happiness, according to the creation story in the biblical book of Genesis, God said, "Let there be light." I like to imagine that light replied, saying, "God, I have to wait for my twin brother darkness to be with me. I can't be there without the darkness." God asked, "Why do you need to wait? Darkness is there." Light answered, "In that case, then I am also already there." Journeying through this life as mature people of faith means that we stop pushing away suffering and instead change our relationship to it. We recognize that both light and shadow are present in everything that we do, even on an ordinary day. There's no place that we can go to find happiness because happiness is already here, along with its twin sibling suffering. As we embrace our condition of living alongside suffering, as we accept the nature of that reality, we can then nurture the joy that is already present and allow it to bloom. We can find sources of joy that are never diminished, things that are perennial, like the changing of the seasons or the presence of the holy, and give them our attention. We can also find joy in what is fleeting and ephemeral, and be grateful for a moment of joy that grabs us, and maybe even pass it on to someone else. My prayer for you this week is that a sunbeam of joy will shine unexpectedly on you, and that you will take time to stretch out in it. Find your full length and experience that joy as a constant presence in your life. Give yourself permission to enjoy life, even just for a moment, before you get back to your busy schedule of holding off the doom and gloom of the world. Happiness is already here with you right now. Amen.
Let's be honest. It's kind of an absurd time, isn't it, to speak of joy, especially in these times. Joy stands in stark contradiction to our experiences of the pandemic, in the insufferable political tumult, and in the social unrest that simply shakes us to the core. Now, I've been a news hound from an early age on, ever since my father taught me how to fold the New York Times to the size of a postage stamp so you can read it in the crowded subways of New York. And during my college years, I read at least 2 newspapers a day, sometimes 3. But now, well, for the last month or so, maybe a little bit longer, I only skim the headlines while shaking my head. I fret about the future as the manic roar of authoritarianism threatens to shake the foundations of America's democracy. I grieve as climate change announces its anticipated arrival with fires and hurricanes and extinctions. I've been thinking for a while now, what's happened to joy? Remember joy? Quite by accident, I picked up an old vinyl record last week, a record that featured Leo Kottke. Not only do you have to be a certain age to remember Leo Kottke, but you also have to be of a kind of a peculiar mindset to appreciate him. He was an extraordinary guitarist, and whenever I listened to him play, I would swear there were actually two guitars going on at the same time. But when I saw him perform years and years ago at the Zephyr, remember the Zephyr in Old Salt Lake? I was amazed there was only one solo guitar accompanying his bizarre lyrics sung in a deep bass voice. So this record that I grabbed quite perchance last week, the opening song on the second side of the record was called Grim to the Brim. What a title. Grim to the Brim. And I'm not going to have to recite the words in order for you to have an idea what the song's about. I mean, I think you can guess pretty much what it says. We are all grim to the brim. Why go any further? Except that I was thinking, isn't there any joy? Where's the joy, Leo Kottke? Sing to us of joy. So, I thought I might sing for you a song of joy today, or at least try to identify what joy actually is, lest we have forgotten. First off, you have to be pretty quick to catch any joy at all because it moves so incredibly fast. You have to be ready for it. Grab it as it passes by. Don't be caught napping. Now, I'm not talking about happiness, which offers a nice and secure feeling about your life. Happiness provides a great feeling of contentment. It's happiness that actually allows you to nap because all is going so well in your world. But you see, joy, it's different. Joy does not depend on good circumstances. In fact, quite the opposite. Joy comes to us as a fleeting miracle that can be felt in times of sorrow and in the midst of suffering. On Christmas Eve, we sing joy to the world, not happiness to the world. No, it's about joy. Joy, catch it. It's kind of mysterious because you can feel joy in spite of life's struggles. You know, there's always joy regardless of the difficulties we face. One characteristic of joy is that it awakens us to profound realizations that we are all connected to each other. And there is a certain beauty to be realized even in pain, because there is that connection. Adam Potke describes it better in his book, The Story of Joy, when he says, joy is an illumination, the ability to see beyond something more. So I got to thinking, all right, what is the illumination? What is that something more that becomes visible and produces joy? Well, I think joy becomes apparent, almost like turning on a light switch, when our tenuous connections to others get solidified, even for a moment, and we see a singular kind of beauty in that connection. Now, even when facing hard times, this unexpected insight into the fibers that allow us to bond with other human beings has an almost mystical quality. When I reflect on the joys of my ministry, it's always in relation to others. Joy can visit me in unusual places and circumstances. I've experienced it while listening to the junior choir on a snowy Sunday in church. And I see the proud parents smiling from ear to ear. And the whole church community shows tremendous support with their attentiveness and just outburst of applause. And all these connections come to light in surprising ways. Can I define joy? Not exactly. I do know that joy can arrive unexpectedly in the difficult setting of a one-on-one conversation in the ICU, or it can come while engaging in conversation with someone preparing to die. What happens then is that we can connect on a completely different level. It seems so incongruous that joy can be found in hard situations, even in the midst of pain and suffering. Perhaps the greatest joy in my ministry, sustained over many, many years, was when I went to the hospital playrooms, first for 3 years in Boston, and then for many years here at Primary Children's in Salt Lake City. I went into the playroom as the banjo man. I was armed with only a banjo and a story tree. It was an incredible experience. Boston Children's Hospital was all compartmentalized with separate quarters for oncology, CF, brain surgery, you name it, they had it. Each playroom a reminder of life's tragic elements for which there are no explanations. Now, originally, I thought my volunteer job every Tuesday morning in the hospital was to offer some musical distraction to hospitalized children and get them laughing with some stupid songs and silly stories. But instead, I found joy. I found joy in the gathering of children for whom life had dealt a pretty unfair hand. There was a mysterious capacity felt right alongside the difficulties, felt alongside the sorrow, and even sometimes in the midst of suffering, right there in the playroom. There's a capacity to elevate the experience to a whole different level. The lobby of Boston Children's Hospital is huge. And in one section, a little remote from the busy flow of foot traffic, an area had been carved out for families waiting for their children to get through surgery. And there you'd find parents and grandparents and siblings and friends. There are usually, anywhere between 25, 35, maybe even 40 people who were gathered in that particular area. And one Tuesday, I was asked to play the waiting room, provide a little music to those who were anxiously awaiting the results from the surgery performed on their kids. So as I was playing, and there were a couple of kids who kind of came a little closer to me, and they kind of just moved along with the music. I noticed out of the corner of my eye an elderly black custodian pushing his cleaning cart in my direction. And when he got close enough to be within earshot, he said, "You play the Saints?" Wow. Well, I was thinking, when the Saints go marching in, it's not really part of my repertoire, but I thought I could handle that okay, and I said, "Yes, I can." And I thought he was just making a request. He wanted to hear when the Saints go marching in. Well, what happened just when I was ready to start, he reached into his back pocket and he took out a long comb. And then he reached into another pocket and he took out a tissue. And he folded that tissue and placed it just right over the comb. And then he placed the comb to his mouth. And we started playing music together. Oh, he was good. In fact, I think it was the greatest duet that I'd ever been a part of in my entire life. And all the anxious families leaped to their feet and spontaneously began to dance. What is joy? What is joy that finds you even in times of great pain? It's hard to describe. And maybe that's why I reach for the poets, William Wordsworth for one. In his famous sonnet, Surprised by Joy, he juxtaposes joy and pain in quite compelling ways. In grieving the death of his 3-year-old daughter, Catherine, Wordsworth experiences a moment of joy that, it just suddenly overtakes him. He is indeed surprised by joy. The joy finding him in the midst of great suffering offers healing and comfort. The first line of the sonnet, surprised by joy, impatient as the wind. That first line lets us know that he is eager, impatient, in fact, to share with someone this feeling of joy before it disappears. It came on so suddenly in his grief. He has to talk about it before it's swept away. And in the sonnet, as he's writing this sonnet, he realizes that the one with whom he wants to discuss this joy is his dead daughter. It's Catherine. He's the one he wants to turn to and talk about this joy. He writes, I turn to share the transport. Oh, with whom but thee, long buried in the silent tomb. And Wordsworth goes on to describe the peculiar sense of feeling joy while grieving, which almost made him forget his loss in the first place. Yes, isn't joy somewhat mysterious and awesome? So powerful, it can help you forget your most grievous loss. But the romantic poet that Wordsworth was, he can't stand to leave it at that. He continues with this poem, saying that when joy passes, he experienced the grief all over again. And he's reminded that joy can never really conquer grief. Well, he's right. He's right. I dare say, though, how precious the reprieve. Joy will never defeat sorrow. I learned that lesson well after memorializing a 4-year-old boy I got to know pretty well in the playroom at Primary Children's Hospital. But there was joy in that playroom. And there was joy even at the memorial when we all reenacted his favorite pastime, throwing rocks into the creek at Memory Grove. There we were, lined up both sides of the bank, and we'd take a rock and threw it in the creek, and we thought, yeah, this is fun. We were filled with joy, just for a moment. A more contemporary poet, Jack Gilbert, wrote a poem called Brief for the Defense. A Brief for the Defense. In the poem, he takes on the challenge of defending joy. Can you imagine? He felt like he actually had to defend joy. The moments that we feel joy during stressful and painful times, we feel almost embarrassed, we feel guilty, and he says, no. Let me defend this. Let me defend this emotion of joy that just grips us unawares. His 2-word opening states the situation: sorrow everywhere. And he's talking not about a private grief, as Wordsworth did, but he's speaking globally. Wars, famine, injustice, sorrow everywhere. But then later in the poem, he reminds us we enjoy our lives because that's what God wants. Otherwise, the mornings before summer dawn would not be made so fine. The Bengal tiger would not be fashioned so miraculously well. The poor women at the fountain are laughing together between the suffering they have known and the awfulness in their future, smiling and laughing while somebody in the village is sick. There is laughter every day in the terrible streets of Calcutta, and the women laugh in the cages of Bombay. He concludes, we must risk delight. We can do without pleasure, but not delight. We can do without pleasure, but not delight. And then he drops the big line. We must have the stubbornness to accept joy in the ruthless furnace of this world. We must have the stubbornness to accept joy in the ruthless furnace of this world. You know, I fear that most of us are probably stuck in Leo Kotke's grim to the brim, especially these days. God knows we're aware of everything that's at stake, from the threat of COVID to the threat of losing democracy to the threat of militias. We can just go on indefinitely. Do we have a right? Do we have a right in these troubled times to speak of joy? You know, that's why Jack Gilbert offers not a poem per se, but what he calls a brief. A legal brief that defends the right to feel joy even when you are a little uncomfortable about joy with so much misery going on about you. Joy exists with its hard-to-define mystical quality, because otherwise suffering would flow uninterrupted. The philosopher André Gide referred to joy as a moral obligation. Whoa, that's almost more intense than a legal brief. But the message is the same always, throughout. When we suddenly become aware of our rich connectedness to others, there is joy. The women at the fountain together are laughing and feel joy. Their world, a ruthless furnace. In making music in a hospital playroom, there is joy in connection with the children. Their world, a ruthless furnace. Sitting by a grave, steeped in grief, you feel a connection and there is joy. The world of loss is a ruthless furnace. Although you may be surprised by joy, make room for it. Grab joy as it tries to sneak by you. Be receptive to it, even in deeply troubled times. You know, that's a spiritual practice in and of itself, being open to receive joy. The miracle is joy can always find you. And so welcome it. It will help you heal. It will lift you to a new place where you probably need to be. Welcome joy, always. Amen. As we extinguish the chalice, I'd like to close with these words inspired by the poet Denise Levertov. Intricate and untraceable, weaving and interweaving dark strand with light, designed to link elation grief, joy, all entwined, forever transforming. All praise the weaving, dark with light. Amen.